I'm going to call the board meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mrs. Spanis-Clemens.
Here.
Mrs. Cullen.
Here.
Mrs. Dolan. Ms. Kildare. Mr. Kraus.
Here.
Mr. Rice.
Here.
Ms. Thompson.
Here.
Mrs. Walters.
Here.
Dr. Yarnell.
Here.
Okay, next we have public comment. The Penridge School Board welcomes public comment. According to Policy 903, we remind everyone of the following. Public comment shall be limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise specified by the board. Participants must be recognized by the presiding officer and note their name and municipality. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer rather than individual board members, district employees, or members of the public. A speaker may speak once during each comment period. Please note that these sessions are designated for comments to protect the confidentiality and privacy rights of all members of our community. The board encourages members of the public to direct any comments regarding particular individuals, such as students or district employees, privately to the superintendent or other appropriate administrators or board members, or to communicate with the board and superintendent privately by sending an email to psdschoolboard@penridge.org. Questions raised and not addressed may be followed up at a later time.
Madam President, I would just note that we have 6 or 7 speakers, which is a good amount of public participation for us. And so I would remind the speakers that as Ms. Spanis-Clemens indicated under Policy 903, we have 3 minutes. To make sure that we're fair to everyone, it's 3 minutes, and then that 3 minutes can last a couple more seconds, and then we ask everyone to sum up and move on. And again, that rule is equally applied. There is another comment period at the end of the meeting as well, so everyone will have a chance to have their say. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, first we have Kylie Watson.
Good evening. My name is Kylie Watson, and I'm a senior writer for the school newspaper, The Pendulum, and I am writing an article about the rumors concerning the topic of bringing armed security into the district. I would just like to ask a few questions to confirm or deny the rumors that are spreading around the community. I have a list of 4 questions. Would you prefer that I list them and they be discussed during the meeting or address them one by one?
So Kylie, this is public comment time, so why don't you go ahead and read them all.
Okay.
We then obviously maybe during the course of discussion we might be answering some of them.
Okay.
And if at any point we don't get them answered this evening, I'll follow up with you tomorrow to make sure that we answer any of them that aren't addressed tonight.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So just 4 questions to begin with. My first question is, will our current security officers become school police officers? And if not, will they remain in their current positions? My second question, why are we replacing 2 security guards versus adding 2 to the current staff? My third question, why not just arm our current security officers versus bringing in 2 new armed security officers? And finally, does Penridge School District have a high crime rate that justifies a need for police officers or armed security guards? Thank you.
Okay, Christian Evers.
Okay. My comments are also about the armed guards in schools. First, I'd like to ask you to justify the need for armed guards in our schools. Has there been an increase of incidents that require armed guards? Have we had a need for deadly force, which is concerning? Please give us the data regarding these threats. It might help us understand the path that we're taking. If approved, who would these armed guards be? What would be their qualifications? Will they have the same duties as regular police officers in our community? Would they have an education background to help them understand the students they may be guarding? And finally, would they be looking out or would they be looking in, which concerns me. Also, I'd like to comment on the cost of the measure. I worry that if we place an armed guard, it sounds like in the high school only, parents will request armed guards in all the schools. Since the district has 7 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 1 high school, the Upper Bucks Technical School, I figured there would be need for 17 armed guards total. I figured this by 1 in each elementary school, 2 in the remaining school, or in each of the remaining schools because of the several floors. It could cost well over $1 million annually. I don't know where this money will come from. I understand the safety of our children may not have a price tag, but it does. It will cost. Will these funds come from increased taxes, cuts in education, or an end to athletic programs and arts programs? I'd like you to answer these questions somehow throughout the meeting. Can you justify this dramatic measure? Is this how we want our district to be seen throughout the community, throughout the region as an armed school? Could we not let our teaching professionals, or what I ask you to do is listen to our teaching professionals as they may have a better feel for identifying those students at risk. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Alex Rajan.
I could have stood up there for I'm Alex Rajan from Bedminster Township. I think I spoke to you at the personnel. A lot of the questions that these folks asked, I asked earlier as well. I want to know the reason why we need armed security guard. I've been part of the Penridge School community for quite a while, known to everyone. I'm part of the Penridge Aquatic Club. We actually run our swim meets out of the pool area that you provide for us and we pay for. Past 2 years ago, the doors were open and our parents got in and out. This year there was a different policy, which my wife didn't agree with, but I agreed with, where you actually had a parent sitting at the door allowing the parents and kids coming in. I do believe in hardening the schools. I do think there's a certain level of security we need to take. I've been here since 2007 when the school was built. I haven't heard of anything crazy happening. We've implemented these different procedures. Why are we going from, we added more security guards, which I welcome. Great job in that, but why are we moving from these measures now to an armed security guard? Is there a warranted need for it? And you have to bear with me. I grew up in Brooklyn and I went to school in Boston, so I've seen different things. I moved to this area for a different reason, and I didn't want to have armed security guards for my kids. So, but I just want to hear your reason. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I can't, Gianna Wasserman?
Gitana.
Wasserman?
Hello, my name is Jatana Wasserman and I'm from Bedminster Township. I have 1 child in the high school and 1 at North Middle School. Both will be at the high school next year. My family and I used to live in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, and I followed the gun violence epidemic since the tragedy a little over 6 years ago in December of 2012. In my work in gun violence prevention, I have met many survivors from all over, including Sandy Hook, Columbine, Virginia Tech, the AME Church in Charleston, Fred Guttenberg, father of 14-year-old Jamie, who was killed last year in Parkland, Florida, and parents of many killed in the streets of Philadelphia. I recognize the difficult position in which this board and administration finds itself. These are difficult times, and you must all be struggling to make sure the right decision for all of our children. I hope the decision that you make are evidence-based, and you want to make sure our schools are safe as they can be without causing any harm. I believe having armed guards on campus will not prevent a school shooting, and it has a great risk of causing harm. There was an armed guard at Columbine and an armed guard at Brooklyn. Our high school is huge. It takes 10 minutes to get from one end to the other. The tragedy at Sandy Hook took 5 minutes, and the tragedy at Parkland took only 7. What are the chances of our security officer being in exactly the right place at the right time when something terrible happens? If something happens. Having our security personnel carry loaded, unsecured weapons in a school full of children causes many risks. It introduces significant risk of increased anxiety, especially within our minority population. Risk of overreaction or inappropriate intervention by a safety resource officer with a loaded weapon. Risk of accidental discharge. Risk of an older student overpowering and taking the weapon away. And it also complicates law enforcement response. Having armed guards on site can cause more chaos in an emergency. Armed guards have been also victims caught in the crossfire, unintentionally shot in the heat of the moment. Just 2 weeks ago, a police officer in civilian clothes was shot by friendly fire during a robbery in Queens, New York. During a shooting last November at a bar and grill in Chicago, police entered a chaotic scene and shot the security officer dead. Any perceived benefit of having armed guards on campus is outweighed by the risks. So if you don't do this, what can you do? The resources that will be used for this would be more effectively used by hiring and training more counselors and staff to recognize students before tragedy happens. Recognize students at risk. Create a school community that supports students standing up and stopping incidents before they happen. Train faculty and students to be on the lookout for anyone at risk. And
Ms.
also,
Wasserman, I'm terribly sorry, as I mentioned, that we have 3
You want me to
Could
finish,
you just,
or no?
yes, would you please just sum up quickly?
sure.
Thank you.
The last thing that I would say is to also get over the stigma of not wanting to talk about guns. Last year, we had a program here that was supported by Bucks County DA Matt Weintraub and NOVA, teaching parents and the people in the community to lock up your guns. We teach people about opioids in our community and how to deal with them. We should, do the same thing about guns. And the highest risk factor is an unsecured gun, and we've seen that in this community already. Thank you.
I apologize, I went out of order. Jim O'Connor?
I'm not. Again, my name is Jim O'Connor. My son is a senior at Purpose Girl. Obviously, like everybody else, a lot of people hear about the discussion about armed security. My main concerns is what example, and again, I don't know what you guys are thinking, but what example you're following. If we're following Quakertown Borough, where they have a sworn LEO, or law enforcement officer, in the school who does additional SRO duties, has that training, that's one thing. I understand there's funding available for that. What I'm concerned about is some of this sounds a lot like we're going to put a security guard with a gun in a school. That's a terrible, terrible idea. A law enforcement officer, when they have to possibly shoot humans and be in situations where that might occur, they go through yearly updates with their department. They go through training, FATs, where they simulate shooting situation, simulate the stress and how to deal and when you can and cannot shoot, backstops, things like that. They do this all the time to maintain just a bare ready state to be able to handle a situation like this. If you don't have a sworn law enforcement officer doing this, if the school's just literally going to hire somebody and give them a gun, maybe Act 44 has allowed them to do that now, since Governor Wolf signed that in, but who's going to pay for the training? Who's going to make sure that they're up to date as an officer, a law enforcement officer would be, somebody who might have to kill a human. This is a big deal. If it, excuse me, and a little bit of concerning right now is I don't see anybody from Penridge Regional Police Department here, unless I'm mistaken. If we're talking about arming people and putting them into school in their jurisdiction, I think their input might be wisely sought. That's really about it. I can't see how more guns is the answer, but I hope we're thinking about all these things, the liability that we're going to take on by giving guns to security guards who aren't going to have, I assume, the training that a law enforcement officer would, nor the screening, nor the background checks, nor the evaluations every year to make sure they're still fit to do so. It's a bad, bad road. I understand why you're going and talking about it because of the climate. We're going down a real bad path here that I can't see how it doesn't lead to ruin. If you can answer the questions about who it's going to be, just please think about this. If we're got a crime problem in here that I don't know about, great. If you're really looking to be anti-mass shooting incident, this is not the way it works. Sorry. I was trying to be vague.
Barry Casper?
I'm waiting 10 years to say this. Barry Casper, Town Township. So, a lot of good questions tonight. These questions have been brought up many times years ago, as much as 8 years, as far back as probably 8 or 9 years ago. So, I'm speaking because I have kids in the school and I'm concerned with their safety. I spent some time on the board and I know it's going to be a difficult decision. But in the past years, the district has hardened our facilities. There weren't always vestibules in every school like you see now. They came one at a time. So we've done that, or the boards have done that over the years. We've implemented an entry system, Raptor system, which went through a massive amount of discussion. How it's going to ruin everything, slow everybody down. We've had security consultants come in time and time again. The gentleman before me wondered where Penridge Community was. I was wondering where you were, to be honest, no offense. So they've been here numerous times. We've introduced ALICE training to our staff here over the years. Another lady stood up, had all the gun school violence statistics. I didn't check. I really didn't come that prepared tonight. It was kind of a spur of the moment thing. So we've had a gradual progression of taking care of all we could to deter us from being on the map. And I think we've done a good job of that. Now we're at some new things that have occurred where the past few years Penridge has gotten themselves on the national scene by almost painting a target on ourselves when I used to sit up there. Because suddenly we're in the national news for student protests. Suddenly we're in the national news for bathroom signs. So to me, we're like inviting people to say, oh, now they know who we are. Countless lawsuits that you'll never know about. There's things you talk about in executive session. I wish I could say them here, but I can't. So if you're and some of the questions you're asking of this board, these are basic things that I can guarantee have been gone over countless times. So I'm here to support whatever decision you make. I know these board members, there's probably 40 different board members, 3 different superintendents involved with arriving at this time, at this date. Are we going to go through with this, okay? So I'm going to rely on the time already that was put in by everybody, and that knowledge, and we're not the first ones, we could have been. And finally, I know I'm running out of time, this armed security guard discussion has been lingering for 3 years, just this part of it, where we were going to do it. Then we pulled out. What are we going to do? Are we going to have our own police department? Are we going to tap into regional police? They'll come up with a decision. okay?
Mr. Casper, I'll just ask you to sum up if you don't mind. please.
Thank you for your time. I think you know where I'm coming from, and do a good job. We're counting on you.
Thank you, sir.
That was the last on the list, but if there's anyone else who would like to comment?
Hi, I'm Haley Murphy. I'm a senior at Penridge, and I'm from Percy Borough. And a couple of the things that I wanted to bring up also regarding having a security officer in the school with a gun. I recognize that a security officer seems to be the thing to put a Band-Aid over the problem, but it really doesn't address the root of the problem, and that's issues with our own students. And this is an education environment. I don't want to see students that are afraid to go to school because they can't trust the person that's put in place. And sorry. I would like to address that there's been a rumor going around that the requirements for a security guard wielding a gun in the school would be 3 years on the police force as well as a high school diploma or GED, and I don't see this as enough for a person with the responsibility to have a gun around students. And I'd like to mention, as Mr. Connor brought up, that a person in the school needs police training, but we need to go beyond that. Penridge is not a district in the city that has a terrible crime problem that needs to be addressed immediately. This is something that should not be a rash decision, and I don't think that pushing it through as fast as we can so that we can get to a possible solution is not the right thing to do. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Connie Seeger, I'm a resident of Percy. It's always good to act when there are problems, but when you react, you're only asking for more trouble. And I see this, if you were to push this ahead and vote on this in March, you're reacting. You're reacting to the fear and the things that are out there right now that are scaring parents and grandparents to death to send their kids off to school. There are so many articles. To prepare for this, I started looking up what are the statistics, what are the studies, what's happened in the past. I'm sorry, but there's very little to support your hiring an armed guard or patrolman or whatever you want to call it for this school. There's a lot we can do. We can use the resources, the money you want to put into this, to educate. Isn't that what schools are about? You can educate our teachers to look for signs in students. You can educate our students to be kinder, to be more accepting, to also look for warning signs. Having the drills and knowing a safe place to go has been proven to be helpful. It's saved lives. Having more guns in school has not saved any lives. Several people here have, I'm sure, made examples of the schools where there were guards. Also, you have to remember, when somebody goes off the deep end and wants to come into a school and do damage, they're going to look for the best possible opportunity. They're going to go to the cafeteria. They're going to go to a place where there are a lot of people because they want to do as much collateral damage as they can. Do you want to add another gun to that scene with the chance of another innocent child or teacher being shot? Or would you rather prepare the students so they can best defend themselves and put themselves in the best place if that event ever happens? And the fact that Mr. Collins said you've been discussing this for 3 years, it's on, it's off, That tells me that you're not sure about this at all, and you shouldn't be. You need to really give this thought. You have to look at studies. You have to talk to your faculty. You have to talk to your students, and you have to make a better effort to talk to parents to see how they feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Full disclosure, I have no students in the high school. But I read the news like everybody else, and I care about the sanctity of human life. The day before Columbine happened, nobody thought it would ever happen there. The day before the shooting at Parkland, nobody thought it would ever happen there. If you don't, in almost every case that I have heard of, the only thing that has stopped the shooters is a bullet. You have to take them down. You can't wave your arms. Principals jump in front of students to save the students' lives, and the principal gets killed, and maybe also the student. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And I know that's not popular with this crowd, but in almost every case, you might say, well, there was an armed guard there, and there were still killings. Well, maybe there were 5 killings instead of 15. Do you want to look somebody in the eye and say, your child was number 10 that got killed, and he would have been saved had there been an armed person on site, but we had to wait for the local law enforcement to arrive and get into the building and find out where to go, where is the cafeteria? That armed guard in this building is going to know where that cafeteria is. He's going to hear those shots, he's going to know the building, he will know how to get there, and he will be there minutes ahead of anybody that's driving from the Ben Ridge area police department. I have heard of many more shootings than where a student overtook an armed guard at the school. I know that the shooting up in, I forget the name of the town where the little grade schoolers got shot, that was not a student. And there's many shootings where you can have all the counselors for your current students that you want, but the shooter is from the outside. He may have already graduated. It may just be somebody that lives in the community. So adequate counseling is great, but it's not a guarantee. And I don't want to look the parent of that 12th child that got shot because we were waiting for the local law enforcement to come rather than having somebody right here who knows the building and can get there in 2 or 3 minutes instead of 10.
Any other comments?
Are we allowed to go back, or we have to wait?
You have to wait till the end. Oh, the end of the meeting, Rose.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Leanna Goodrich. I'm a teacher at Penn Ridge High School. I have to thank you. I've been here since 2003, which is when I started here. So I taught back in the days of the lower house, where it was quite intimidating because kids passed between the 3 buildings.